Hey there, Jeep Divers. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Oh, and that bell icon, too, for all the latest updates. Today we're going deep on something that's been making waves, especially if you're a UPSC aspirant or just someone who, keeps up with geopolitics. We're talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SDO for short.
Yeah, the SDO.
It might sound like just another acronym, but trust me, this one's a big deal. We're talking 40% of the world's population.
That's massive.
And hold on, get this, 20% of global GDP.
Wow, that's a lot of influence in one place.
Exactly. And to break it all down, the objectives, the challenges, what it means for India, we've got an expert in international relations who's been following the SCO since, well, pretty much the beginning. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here. You know, the SCO doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves, but it's a major player, especially in Asia. Anyone who's serious about international relations really needs to understand the SCO, to grasp how the power dynamics are shifting globally these days.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is the SCO? Where did this whole thing come from, and what was its initial purpose?
Right, so the story starts back in '96 with the Shanghai Five.
Okay, the Shanghai Five.
This was a group China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan who came together because of, well, regional security concerns, especially in Central Asia.
Makes sense.
After the Soviet Union collapsed, they needed to figure out things like borders and just build some trust.
So it was very regionally focused at the start. When did it actually become the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and how did it grow beyond those initial security concerns?
Well, Uzbekistan joined the group in 2001, and that's when they officially formed the SKO. But it was more than just a name change. There were bigger ambitions at play.
I see.
In 2002, they signed the SCO Charter. This expanded their goals.
Beyond just security.
Right. They included things like economic cooperation, cultural exchange, even environmental protection.
So it evolved from a regional security group into something much, much broader. How can listeners even wrap their heads around this wider set of objectives? It sounds like they're trying to tackle a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. One way to remember the key aims is to think of the acronym SECURE.
Secure. Okay, I like it already.
It stands for Security, Economic Development, Connecting the Region, Uniting People, Respect for Sovereignty, and Environmental Protection. It really sums up the SKO's multifaceted approach.
I love that. Secure. So easy to remember. It really does highlight how diverse the SKO's objectives are. But with so many countries and such a broad agenda, how does it actually function? What kind of structure allows them to pursue all these goals?
Well, the SKO has this multi-layered structure to handle, all the complexity. At the top, you have the heads of state council. This is the big decision-making body.
Setting the overall direction.
Exactly. And then there's the heads of government council. They're more focused on the practical stuff, economic cooperation, the budget, those sorts of things.
Okay, so those two councils are really the core leadership making the big decisions. What about the day-to-day operations? How does that all work?
So for the day-to-day, you have the Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs. They handle the ongoing activities, making sure the SKO's plans actually happen.
Just keeping the wheels turning. But I remember you mentioning combating terrorism as one of their key focuses. Do they have a specific body for that?
Absolutely. There's the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure, or ORAT.
RX.
Based in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. They're critical for coordinating intelligence, doing joint exercises and coming up with those counterterrorism strategies across member states.
Essential work, especially these days.
It is.
And then, of course, there's the SKO Secretariat. They're like the admin hub, right? Keeping everything running smoothly.
Exactly. They're based in Beijing and provide, all the essential support to the SKO's different bodies and their many initiatives.
So it's clear they have a very well-defined structure to carry out all this work. But beyond the practical side, what are the core principles that guide the SCO? What brings this diverse group of countries together in the first place?
Well, at its core, the SKO is guided by what's called the Shanghai Spirit.
The Shanghai Spirit.
Yeah, it's this set of principles emphasizing things like mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, respect for cultural diversity. They're all working towards common development.
It sounds like they're really trying to build a strong sense of partnership, even with countries that, may have had their differences in the past.
Yeah, that's the key. The Shanghai Spirit is all about finding common ground, despite those differences, building a shared destiny, working together. And importantly, the SDO doesn't align with any one bloc or against any specific country.
They're playing their own game.
Right. They want dialogue and cooperation with everyone. They call it promoting a multipolar world order.
Multipolar. That's interesting. Can you explain what that means in the context of the SCO and how it contrasts with, well, the current world order?
Sure. Think of it like this. In a multipolar world, power is spread out among several major players, or poles, rather than being concentrated in one dominant nation or bloc. The SKO is often seen as pushing for this multipolarity, as a way to balance out what some see as a U.S.-dominated system.
A counterbalance.
Yeah, it's about creating a more balanced global landscape, giving different regions and countries a voice.
Which brings us to a question I'm sure many of our listeners are thinking about, especially those in India. What does the SKO mean for India? It's clearly a powerful organization, but what are the specific implications for India's foreign policy, its role in the region?
Well, India's membership in the SKO brings both opportunities and challenges. It's a pretty unique situation.
Let's start with the opportunities. How does being part of the SKO benefit India?
One major benefit is increased influence in Central Asia. This region is strategically vital for India, and the SEO gives them a platform to engage with those Central Asian countries on all sorts of issues: counterterrorism, trade, energy, infrastructure, you name it.
Building relationships, leveraging those relationships to tackle shared concerns.
Exactly. And the SEO also gives India a forum to fight terrorism and extremism, which are, as you know, huge security threats. Collaborating with other SEO members means sharing intelligence, coordinating operations, working together on more effective strategies to combat those threats.
Invaluable in today's world. And what about economic benefits? What does the SEO offer India in terms of, say, trade and investment?
There's huge potential there. The SEO could really boost economic ties between India and the other member states, especially in Central Asia. It provides a platform for negotiating trade deals, attracting investment, and cooperating in sectors like energy, transportation, infrastructure.
Big stuff.
India can also use the SEO to access valuable energy resources from Central Asia, which is important for meeting their growing energy needs.
So a lot of compelling opportunities for India, but you mentioned challenges as well. What are some of the potential downsides or complexities of SEO membership for India?
One of the biggest challenges is navigating those complex relationships with China and Pakistan within the SDO. India has these long-standing border disputes with both countries, and their close partnership within the SEO, well, it just adds another layer of complexity.
It sounds like a real balancing act for India, cooperating within the SEO while also managing those existing tensions.
That's it, exactly. And then there's the challenge of balancing SDO membership with India's partnerships with Western countries, particularly the Quad.
The quadrilateral security dialogue.
Right, which includes the US, Japan, and Australia. So India has to find ways to engage with both the East and the West, pursuing its interests in multiple geopolitical arenas.
A delicate balancing act, to say the least.
For sure. Another challenge is the SEO's consensus-based decision-making. It can be slow, a bit cumbersome at times. That might limit India's ability to push their own agenda within the organization or act decisively on certain issues.
So India's membership in the SCO is multifaceted, to say the least. It brings significant opportunities, but also some serious challenges. It seems like navigating those complexities will be key to maximizing India's role within the organization.
Absolutely. India's role in the SEO is something to watch closely. It'll have a big impact not just on India's foreign policy, but on the future of the SEO itself.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the SEO. As we unpack this, really influential organization, we're going to dig into some of the debates surrounding its role on the global stage, its relationship with the West, and all those complexities of security and economic cooperation.
It's hard to overstate the potential impact of an organization of this scale. In the last part, we were talking about how the SEO covers 40% of the global population and 20% of global GDP.
Yeah, those numbers are just remarkable. And it keeps growing, too. With the recent additions like Iran becoming a full member, it really adds to this, already fascinating geopolitical landscape.
That brings up a question we hear a lot. Is the SEO really a counterweight to the West, or is that oversimplifying things? It's a question that definitely sparks a lot of debate. Some analysts see the SEO as, like, a direct challenge to the existing world order, which they view as dominated by the West, especially the U.S.
Okay.
They highlight the SCO's emphasis on multipolarity, that focus on regional cooperation, and their efforts to, create a more equitable global order where power is more evenly distributed.
So creating alternatives to the current, I guess, systems of global governance.
Exactly. But it's important to note that the STO isn't explicitly anti-West. Their charter is pretty clear about that it's not directed against any other country or organization. In fact, they advocate for dialogue and cooperation with all nations.
So it sounds like they're trying to carve out a space for themselves on the world stage. Not necessarily to, replace existing structures, but to offer a different approach.
I think that's a good way to put it. They want to be seen as, a champion of a more inclusive, more balanced world order where, everyone has a voice and can play a meaningful role.
And security is a big part of that, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the areas where the SCO is really making its presence felt.
Yeah, absolutely. The SCO has been actively involved in combating terrorism, separatism, extremism, especially in Central Asia, which has had its share of security challenges.
And you mentioned RATIS, the regional anti-terrorist structure, in the previous segment. What role does it play in those efforts?
RATS is a key mechanism for tackling those shared security threats. It helps with intelligence sharing, conducting joint military exercises, and developing those counterterrorism strategies. This kind of collaboration is, absolutely essential for effectively combating terrorism because, as we know, it often goes beyond just one country's borders.
It's not just about traditional security threats, though, is it?
You're right. The SCO recognizes that security in the 21st century is much broader.
Right.
They're also focused on what we call non-traditional security challenges. Things like drug trafficking, cybercrime, cross-border organized crime. Those things can be just as destabilizing as traditional threats.
So they're taking a more holistic approach to security, acknowledging how these different threats, they're all connected.
Exactly. The goal is to create a secure and stable environment for their members, tackling both internal and external threats.
And alongside security, they're also really pushing for economic cooperation, which we touched on earlier.
Oh, absolutely. The SCO views economic development as a key pillar of, peace and stability in the region. They believe that fostering economic growth and interdependence among the member states is, crucial for reducing conflict and promoting integration.
So what are some of the specific initiatives they're pursuing to actually, boost trade and economic cooperation?
There are several things in the works. For instance, there's been talk about setting up a free trade zone within the SCO.
Wow.
That would dramatically reduce trade barriers and really enhance economic integration. There are also some really ambitious plans for infrastructure projects.
Like what?
Things like transportation corridors, energy pipelines. These projects would connect the region and make it much easier to move goods, services, and energy resources.
Those sound like, potential game changers, connecting countries that are geographically quite far apart with modern infrastructure. It could unlock a lot of economic potential.
That's the idea. These initiatives are all about creating a more prosperous and interconnected Eurasian space where everyone benefits.
And this focus on connectivity seems particularly relevant for India, given their connect Central Asia policy.
Absolutely. The SCO gives India a framework to really strengthen their economic and strategic ties with Central Asia, a region that's rich in resources and, holds significant economic potential for India.
So the SCO allows India to engage with this strategically important region, potentially bypassing some of the traditional roadblocks, like, the complexities of dealing with Pakistan.
Precisely. And by building closer ties with Central Asia, India can counterbalance China's growing influence, which is definitely something Indian policymakers are thinking about.
Speaking of China, one initiative that's been getting a lot of attention, both within the SCO and globally, is China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. How does that fit into the SCO's economic agenda?
So the BRI is this huge infrastructure and investment program. The goal is to connect China with the rest of Eurasia and beyond.
I've heard a lot about it.
It involves building roads, railways, ports, all sorts of infrastructure across a massive area.
And it's been met with, mixed reactions, hasn't it?
It has. Some SCO members, like Pakistan, are, really enthusiastic about it. They see it as an engine for economic growth. They welcome the investment, the potential for job creation, and the infrastructure upgrades.
But others are a bit more hesitant.
Yeah, some countries, like India, have expressed reservations.
No.
Concerns about the transparency of the projects, the potential for, unsustainable debt for participating countries, and those strategic implications of increased Chinese influence in the region.
So the BRI has kind of become a dividing line within the SCO, revealing the different priorities and interests of the member states.
It has, and it's something the SCO will have to carefully navigate going forward. Finding a balance between China's ambitions and the concerns of other members will be crucial for the SCO's long-term success.
It shows that even within an organization that emphasizes cooperation and shared goals, there are still, competing interests, potential points of friction that have to be managed.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes the SCO so fascinating to, study and observe. It's like a microcosm of the complexities of international relations in the 21st century.
Now, shifting gears a bit, we've talked about security and economics, but the SCO also promotes cooperation in other areas, like, culture and people-to-people exchanges.
Oh, yeah, they do. They recognize that building strong relationships between countries goes beyond just, government interactions. They see cultural diplomacy as this really important tool for, like, fostering understanding, breaking down stereotypes, and building bridges.
Building connections between people from different backgrounds?
Exactly. The SCO organizes all sorts of programs to promote cultural exchange.
Like what?
Film festivals, educational exchanges, youth forums, tourism initiatives. These efforts are especially important in a region as diverse as Eurasia, with so many different cultures, languages, and religions.
It reminds us that building a more peaceful and cooperative world involves more than just, political and economic agreements. It requires those genuine connections between people and cultures.
For sure. The SKO's focus on cultural exchange is all about celebrating this diversity while also finding common ground and building a sense of community.
It's a multifaceted approach, recognizing that true partnership involves more than just, shared interests. It's about building understanding and trust at multiple levels. And that's something we can all learn from, whether we're, policymakers or just citizens trying to understand an increasingly complex world.
Welcome back. It's the final part of our deep dive on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
It's been quite a journey, exploring where it all started, their goals, and just how complex this organization really is.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
The SKO's security initiatives, economic cooperation, how they focus on cultural exchange, and that whole idea of a multipolar world order they're pushing for.
Right. And as we wrap up, let's look ahead a bit, at some of the key debates about the future of the SEO.
One of the big ones is, can the SKO really live up to that potential, as a counterweight to the West?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's a hot topic among analysts and policymakers.
Some argue that, well, the SEO is just too internally divided right now to really challenge the existing global order.
What do they point to?
The different interests, the priorities of the member states, the whole India-China-Pakistan dynamic, which is complex to say the least, and just, the lack of a clear, unified vision for the future of the SEO.
So internal cohesion and a shared vision are seen as potential roadblocks.
Right. But then there's another side to it. Some believe that the SDO is growing, economically and militarily, combined with that shared interest in multipolarity, in a more equitable global order. Well, that makes them a force to be reckoned with.
They see it as a game changer.
Exactly. They argue the SKO is steadily building up its own institutions, its mechanisms for cooperation, becoming more assertive in its foreign policy, and, attracting new members like Iran, which expands their reach even further.
So it's a dynamic organization constantly changing and adapting.
Exactly. Only time will tell which perspective will ultimately, prevail. But one thing's for certain. The SKO is a major player, and what happens with them will have a huge impact on the global balance of power.
Another big debate is about China's role within the SKO.
Right. Given their economic and military strength, there are questions about whether they exert too much influence,
As a valid concern.
Some worry that China might use the SCO to advance its own agenda, create a regional order that favors them.
And they point to China's, economic dominance within the organization and their increasingly assertive foreign policy in the region.
Those are valid points. However, some argue that China's leadership is actually essential for the SCO to succeed. While they point to China's willingness to invest in infrastructure development projects, in the region, their commitment to stability, and their role in driving economic cooperation.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. China's leadership has potential benefits and risks.
Exactly. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. China is the most powerful member, that's for sure, and they're definitely using that power.
But other members, like Russia and India, They have their own interests, their own agendas. They're not just going to sit back and watch.
Of course not. They'll keep pursuing their goals within the SDO, making sure it works for them too.
So the SKO isn't just a tool for China. It's a platform for multiple players, each trying to, negotiate a shared vision for the region's future.
Exactly. It's important to remember that. The SDO is complex, dynamic, with diverse members and a whole mix of competing interests. Navigating that complexity is, well, it's key.
Now, beyond those big geopolitical debates, another challenge for the SKO is internal stability. Several member states are dealing with political instability, economic inequality, ethnic tensions. Those things can affect how well the organization functions overall.
Absolutely. Those internal challenges can undermine cooperation and even threaten their security agenda.
Like, for example, the instability in Afghanistan is a huge concern for the Central Asian SKO members.
Yeah, that potential spillover, things like terrorism, drug trafficking, refugees, it's a concern for everyone in the SKO.
So dealing with those internal challenges is crucial for the SKO to achieve those goals, to actually create a stable and secure environment for its members.
Exactly. They need a multi-pronged approach, better border security, helping members who are struggling, and tackling those root causes of instability like poverty and inequality.
And finally, there's the question of the SKO expanding even further. We've already seen a lot of growth since it started, and other countries are interested in joining.
Right. The SKO has to decide who to let in, and they'll base that on several things.
Like what?
Strategic considerations, whether the country aligns with the SKO's principles and what they can bring to the table.
I've heard Turkey, Belarus, and Mongolia mentioned as potential candidates.
Yeah, each of those would change the dynamics of the SEO, add new layers of complexity.
So further expansion could really impact the SEO's future direction, its role in global affairs.
It could boost their influence and reach, but also bring new challenges, especially as the decision-making process gets even more intricate.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, it's clear the future of the SKO is full of potential, but also a lot of unknowns.
It's an organization that could really reshape geopolitics, offer a new model for cooperation, but it faces a lot of challenges, both internal and external, that it has to overcome.
Whether they can do it, whether they can achieve their vision, well, we'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for sure, the SEO matters. It's going to continue to shape our world.
Definitely. We've only scratched the surface in this deep dive. If you're interested in learning more, check out the sources we used.
We'll have links to those in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Don't miss our future deep dives into the fascinating world of geopolitics.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.